and welcome to the I3 lecture series hosted by the Masters in Digital Photography here at the School of Visual Arts. I am Julie Graham. Thank you for being here for this last lecture of the semester, and we look forward to seeing you again all bundled up in January. Here to warm the cockles of your heart, which is obviously an English expression, which you can look up later, but your cockles are like heart-shaped bivalves. So, here to warm the cockles of your hearts as we close this season is Kesha Lambert, a New York-based, internationally acclaimed photographer of hundreds of weddings and events. Her fashion-influenced images have been published in magazines including Inside Weddings, Brides Magazine, The Knot, New York Times, and People Magazine. Kesha is a Sony Alpha artisan, and in a nice bit of timing, she was at a Sony event here in New York 2 weeks ago with our own Katrine Eisman, who founded this master's program. Kesha hosts her own workshops and is a generous social sharer with wonderful videos of herself behind scenes, art directing, and giving out tips in spectacular venues and out on the streets. Kesha's thoughtfully curated website includes the most linked categories that I have ever seen, from locations to venues, to vendors she works with, types of weddings, cultures, and my favorite, images sorted by type of light. Dusk, midday, night. It's very cool. Thank you, Kesha.
Thank you so much for that glowing introduction, and thank you everyone for being here this evening. I am deeply honored to be here. I am a girl that loved photography, and if you would have asked me a couple of decades ago, would I be giving a lecture and speaking on platforms throughout the photography community, I would have told you that you're lying. I am a proud Jamaican, so I am a first-generation American born to Jamaican parents, and that's thereby a Jamaican. I am a New York native. I was born in North Carolina, only by a technicality, literally just born in North Carolina. A little known secret, I did not I didn't know much about North Carolina until my adult life. Raised in the Bronx, New York, and now living in Pennsylvania, still kind of New York adjacent, but I live with my family in Pennsylvania. We are a family of 5. I am a mother of 3 sons, including a set of twins. My husband and I work together in our wedding, portrait, and event business. Just want to give a quick introduction before getting into my topic this evening. Tonight I am going to focus a lot of the images that I'm sharing are going to take you along my journey in photography and how did I get here. And I'm going to focus a lot of what I talk about on weddings and portraits. As you know, if you were to find me if you search me up online, you'll find a lot of wedding work. Little known secret is that I do a ton of other types of work. I also do some commercial and brand work. I do corporate event work. But the bulk of my business is focused, and my work is focused around weddings and events. I like to say that I do people work. And it's a funny story. I am an attorney. That is what my profession is. That's what I went to school for. I still am I keep my license active. It's not collecting dust. Even though I am a full-time photographer, I am an attorney by profession. That is what I set out for my career to be. And I had a blossoming career in the legal field, and it happened when I was expecting twins, and I was downsized out of my very cush and secure job. And suddenly, the hobby, the thing that was kind of my passion, my creative outlet, the side thing that I did to kind of distract, to my outlet, the thing that brought me joy, suddenly the pathway started opening up for that to be my main thing. It took getting a boot in the back for me to kind of reconsider and rethink what career happiness means, what job security means, and how I could create that for myself and for our family. And that is kind of what brought me here. So how it started. This is a pretty accurate representation of how it started. My love of photography started when I was a little girl, and I was gifted this Cabbage Patch 110 film camera, toy camera. I am an extreme introvert. I love people, but a lot of common misconception about introverts is that we don't like people. I love people. They just drain me. And so, and so photography was a way for me to be a part of things and engage with the world without actually having to be in the center of the focus of things. I would be out and about and, at family functions or just kind of out in the world and with my little camera. And my love of the art, the seed was sown very, very early on. And as with many photographers, when you are starting out, whether you have, formally trained or you kind of happened into the craft, a lot of us start out doing anything and everything. When I started out, it took me a while to call myself a photographer. But it started with a lot of experimentation and play with friends. And that included a broad range of subject matter. So boudoir, portrait work, a lot of portrait work is what I engaged in when I started out. Anything and everything but the kitchen sink. Digging into the archives, I really enjoyed preparing this talk because it allowed me to revisit some things that I probably would not proudly show otherwise. But it's something that tells a story of how I got here today. I did a lot of kind of anything that a friend wanted me to do. And connecting back to what kind of pushed me in the direction of taking the craft seriously and reconsidering what it might look like for me. I realized that this phase of experimentation and kind of exploring and doing all the things, it was a necessary part of the process for me to find the thing that I enjoyed and loved doing. In kind of doing all of this work, I was the house photographer for a casino in Connecticut and did a lot of events of their, celebrity events, concerts, and being the house photographer at a casino that hosted a lot of concerts and, parties, it opened up my eyes to the thing that I really enjoyed doing. I really enjoyed people photography. I enjoy photographing people, but that could be any number of things. And it wasn't until I had the opportunity to assist a wedding photographer that I had my light bulb moment that this is the thing I love. I am a big sap. I really enjoy the beauty of a wedding. I enjoy knowing that the photos we take are going to live within a family for generations. I enjoy the meaning of the start of someone's story together, whether or not that chapter ends in 2 years or 20 years, or that story goes on for a lifetime. I enjoy the fact that we are creating meaningful images of people that matter to the clients that I work with. So that is how it started, and this is how it's going now. A far cry from my Cabbage Patch Kid days, camera days. I, as a wedding photographer, have to have all the things, all the gear to keep up with the pace of a wedding day. And if anyone knows anything about weddings, it can be, if you've never photographed a wedding before, it can be a boot camp for photographers. You encounter every possible type of lighting condition you could imagine, environmental conditions you could imagine, and relationship dynamics that you can imagine. And with that, it requires preparedness. So this is me today. If you ask me what's in my bag, I say everything. So finding my niche. How did I find my niche? My niche is, as I mentioned, weddings. I have a focus in weddings, and it was born of passion, but I won't say that it wasn't for practical reasons either. I found that wedding photography businesses had a very, the ease of entry into starting a wedding photography business, right? You do need to get the experience under your belt before you take on a wedding. However, the structure of a wedding photography, running a wedding photography business is such that you can make it a business and a profitable one that you can make a good, decent living and provide for yourself and your loved ones. And so the reasons that led me here were both passion and practical. When I decided that I wanted to do weddings, this image here is kind of a representation of how things started for me. I didn't jump right in and announce that I'm open for business. I started weddings by doing what a lot of photographers do, which is a styled shoot. This is not a real wedding. And it was a way of, one, building some familiarity with the art of posing people together, couples together. It was a way of figuring out what my style is and how I wanted to, what type of wedding photographer I wanted to be. This is another style shoot that I did. It was titled Bollywood Meets Brooklyn, and it was actually a shoot commissioned for a bridal magazine. And if you can imagine, it was very early in my career. I wasn't yet photographing weddings full time. I probably had one or two weddings under my belt at the time that I did this. So I was very excited. I thought it was a great opportunity for me to get in front of potential future clients, but it was also a wonderful opportunity to connect with other people that worked in the wedding industry. And I'll talk about the power of relationships and how it's been a driving force in my career. But this was a great example of an opportunity that was like a tree branch. It created a myriad of other opportunities that spawned out of this one shoot because of the people that I met while doing this project. I didn't just do a couple of style shoots and then jump right into my very first wedding. When people ask me, what's a great way to get started in weddings? If you're interested in photographing weddings, how do you find clients? How do you get good at it? Like, how do you learn how the flow of a wedding? How do you learn what to expect? How to navigate some of the nuances and intricacies of the client relationship management that comes along with being a wedding photographer? And I always advise people to hold someone's light. And so I spent a lot of time doing these style shoots and being the lighting assistant, being the second photographer for other photographers, experienced photographers, not picking their brain and asking questions while working, but just soaking it all in. And I had many a light bulb moment just holding someone's light. And to this day, if someone were to come and ask me to come and, hey, if they said they needed help at a wedding, I'd show up with bells on, because the lessons that you can learn just from seeing someone in their element, and for seeing how someone navigates a wedding day, those are the most invaluable types of lessons that you can get, the experience. This is an image that I captured at the very first wedding that I took on as the main photographer. I gave this couple the works. I gave them the world for very little bit of money. I was just very excited to have, a wedding. I was very excited that this person, at the time that they booked me, I didn't have much in the way of wedding work beyond the styled shoots. And I was very transparent about the fact that these were not real weddings. And it took a lot of trust for them to have me. It was a Nigerian wedding, a 2-day wedding. And if anyone knows anything about Nigerian weddings, there's usually a traditional engagement on the first day, and the second day is the white wedding. Both functions are huge celebrations with a lot of important guests, aunties, uncles, important people in attendance. And so that was quite a bit of trust, and happy to report that I did not completely tank it. I did a decent job. But I chose this image to share in particular because if I were to share the entire wedding, it would have been a lot of kind of your run-of-the-mill wedding stuff, right? One of the main criticisms, or one of the main things I hear people say about weddings is like, oh, it's so boring. A lot of things repeat, I could never. The people, like the brides, the bridezillas, the groomzillas, the momzillas, and it's just, same old, same old, same old. I chose this image because although my very first wedding had a lot of I won't say boring, I'll say classic, kind of your traditional wedding things, types of images, I pushed myself. This is the wedding where I learned that it was okay to push yourself and to experiment even when you're on the job, as long as you do it safely. And because this was me experimenting with a getting ready shot that I had captured in a very safe way, kind of straight on. And then I decided to push myself to look for a new perspective, a new vantage point of the moment. She was checking herself out after getting her makeup done, and the makeup artist. So it was a candid, the makeup artist was kind of bustling around this bride. It was a candid moment, but it was also a moment where I realized that wedding work can be fresh, it can be innovative, and it's okay to experiment. This was another wedding that I photographed early on, and it's a bride and her bridesmaids. And again, I chose this image to share because this is in line with my love of pushing my vantage point and perspective and storytelling. I wanted to capture this bride, and this was supposed to be her traditional bride and bridesmaids photo, and I wanted to push myself to tell a deeper story about this moment. When you're at weddings, there can be a lot of excited guests who are very curious and interested, and they will tag along when you're doing your formal portraits, right? Usually it's supposed to be a private moment so that you can kind of capture these formal portraits of the couple and the wedding party. And the people, because of the spot we chose, we ended up getting the majority of the guests kind of gathering around watching me take photos of this bride and her bridesmaids. I was originally standing in front of them for a front perspective of them. I'd lined them up on a staircase, taking a very traditional shot. It occurred to me that there was more story in this moment. When I realized how many watchful eyes were behind me, I decided to move around the moment and tell the story of what was happening in that moment. And it was exciting for me to see that weddings are rich with layers of characters and tiny little moments that you can weave together to create something really beautiful and interesting, and to create a final collection of images that will allow the couple to kind of walk through their wedding day and see it through a different lens than their own, because when you are getting married, you don't realize all of the things that are happening around you and unfolding around you. And so it's really a great way for a photographer to kind of deliver something to the client that allows them to see their wedding day through different eyes. Finding my style. So this is an oldie but goodie. It's not, I will tell you this. I pulled some photos, and one of the things about me very early on is that I would sacrifice flawless execution to get the shot. I was and still am very impulsive, very much in the moment when it comes to how I choose to pose people, how I choose to photograph a moment. If an idea comes to me, I'm already doing it before someone could say that might not work out or that might not be a great idea. I do believe that creativity requires a certain degree of willingness to do a thing, even if it might be totally terrible. It might not be great, but your willingness to do a thing even in the face of people telling you it's not a great idea, or you shouldn't do it, or you're not going to be able to execute it technically. There's going to be flaws in execution. I never listened to those voices, and I'm glad I didn't. And the reason I'm glad is because you can develop as an artist and learn the execution and then decide which rules to adhere to and which rules to break. And I think that was a huge part of my journey in finding what my style is. This was an engagement photo session, and this was my phase of being obsessed with reflection, and any mirror, or a mirror really hated to see me coming, because if there was a mirror, I was going to use it some way, somehow. But yeah, this was in my exploration of finding, what I wanted people to feel, see, and think when they looked at my work. It wasn't just experimentation and testing, and it was a lot of soul searching, a lot of listening and looking back at my work and seeking the advice of people, trusted people, seeking their critique. But it was a lot of soul searching, a lot of reflecting and looking at, whether or not a photo was good or great or not so great. I looked at some of my work to try to find overarching themes. And one of the things that I discovered in kind of reflecting and looking at the things that I was drawn to when I would take a picture, I started to notice that there were consistent themes of play with light. I love movement. I love photos that felt palpable. Like, I love photos that when you look at it, you feel like you're pulled into the scene, into the moment. I love framing, and I love to take pictures of the things that caught my attention from a perspective that may not be from a riskier perspective. I realized that I enjoyed taking risks. This is a photo of brides. This was my shoe shot for some bridesmaids. And asking people who just got their hair and makeup done to lay on their back on the floor so that I could take a picture of their shoes upside down, and asking two others to stand in a windowsill in heels. That was me pushing it. And grateful for those that say yes, and I'm okay with those that tell me to kick rocks and say no, because, but I'm always going to ask, and I realized that I needed to leave space for taking those risks and for asking for play. Again, drawn to framing, and I realized, I didn't mention, I'm a Gemini. I think my style is very air sign-ish. Meaning I feed off of the environment and the people, and I go through phases of inspiration where I may fixate on a certain kind of scheme or thing, and you'll find those themes throughout my work for maybe this period of time. And then I move on to other things and new obsessions. But there are some things that have been consistent throughout. This is another bride and bridesmaids photo, and the consistent themes for me are I steer away from tradition, and I enjoy pulling inspiration from the environment, the people, the light in a space, and I use those things. But I needed to explore, how can I do this safely? Because when you're a wedding photographer, you have contractual obligations to fulfill, and you don't want anybody's mom mad at you because all you got was upside down shoe shots. So I learned to develop a system of being able to explore and play and experiment even on the wedding day. And that system was safe shot first, master that, do that quickly. I've fulfilled my contract. Now I can spend the rest, maybe 80% of my time, pushing and playing and experimenting. And in doing that, I started to grow a client base that wanted that. When it comes to people work, you attract what you show. And because I showed a lot of work that was non-traditional and kind of pushing the envelope, so to speak, I started to attract clients who wanted that, they wanted the experimentation. Another thing that I realized that I enjoy doing is that the editing process is a part of my creative process. It's a significant part of my creative process. I am a lean, mean, creative cropping machine. I love to do a creative crop and pull back of that image. Nice. Mm-hmm. I do extreme creative crops. So I realized that although I'm a person that is impulsive and that I will oftentimes prioritize getting the shot or doing the thing that I feel inspired to do in the moment over flawless execution, I realized that since I enjoy doing a creative crop, I need to get really good at the execution part. I cannot compromise or sacrifice that. I have to find a balance between the two. And it's interesting, if you know anything about wedding photography and what our day is, what it's like, there's very little margin for correcting errors on the day and in the moment. You can't ask for do-overs of certain things because there are real-time things that happen, and it's just not the same if grandpa cries or if grandpa gets on the dance floor and drops into the split. If you miss it, you can't ask grandpa to do a do-over. It's just not going to be the same. And so, I really do think that it's what I enjoy about weddings is that it keeps me on my toes. It keeps me on my toes creatively. It keeps me on my toes in terms of learning. I'm a forever student, but it keeps me on my toes in terms of just becoming a better photographer. The theme of framing, again, this was not so early, but not so. This was captured a few years ago. I want to say probably back 2014, 2015-ish. Maybe a little later than that. But again, those themes of framing and play with light are strewn throughout my work. Now, I chose this image to share this evening because this is a type of light that I was taught to avoid. When you photograph weddings, this is not, I think now that we have a lot of people that enjoy this kind of, this hard light. This was some sunlight, kind of patchy, little patches of light that you find from midday coming through a window. And I was taught to avoid it. I was told that it was bad light. And one of the things that weddings have taught me is that there's no such thing as bad light. And all the light is an opportunity. And this was I think I marked this image as my love of the exercise of finding light that you would not traditionally or typically use and finding ways to use it. And I often seek out the undesirable light. And when it comes to weddings, unlike a lot of other areas of focus in photography, there is a heavy emphasis on perfection, depending on the client base that you work with. I work a lot of large multicultural weddings. I also do intimate kind of elopement, destination style weddings, but I do have a lot of weddings with, elaborate decor, 20 people in the wedding party. They are big celebrations, and there are certain wedding clients that really they want a curated, perfect kind of reflection of that day. I take a middle of the road approach, and when it comes to that, because I believe as a wedding photographer, my role is twofold. My role is to deliver on the service. I'm a service provider, but I'm also an artist. And so I deliver the messy parts of the day too. The messier moments, I think those are important, and they often end up in the wedding album. And the same goes for the types of posing and lighting that I'll work with. I will seek out these kind of messier kind of moments and undesirable sources of light to see if I can create something fresh and something new. I lean very sultry and in my posing and styling, and especially when I'm working with couples, I want to show the connection between the people. I want to show intimacy. I want you to feel the anticipation and feel the chemistry between a couple. And so my posing often incorporates these anticipatory kind of moments between people. Feels a little bit weird sometimes directing these types of images. But I think it's a great way of translating a connection between people, their relationship, their love for each other, their chemistry, directing these moments and creating an image that makes you feel like you're being pulled into something that's about to happen is another kind of staple in my approach to wedding and couples photography. I like to use the environment a lot. I have to credit wedding photography specifically, for bringing me to some of the most beautiful places and some of the most interesting textured places. I mean, this is Queens, so Queens is beautiful. But but I will say that because weddings have brought me to a number of places, inspiring environments, I like to incorporate the environment in my portrait work. I think that it's important to pull back and find ways to kind of tell it. It's a part of the story. The setting is a huge part of the story, and I love environments that offer opportunities to play with texture and play with contrast and shadow. In discovering my style, I realized one thing about weddings is that very early on, posing groups was very intimidating. Quite fearful thing to have large groups of people who are celebrating and, joyful, but also may have been drinking. I am an introvert, so strong personalities are quite contrasting against mine. And one of my greatest fears very early on was posing and working with groups. I'm sharing this image because this was one of the first times I realized that I actually am a people whisperer, and I like posing groups. This was a scripted, candid moment. And they were exiting the wedding ceremony, and we were walking to the location where we're going, the real location where we're going to do photos. And one of the things about being a wedding photographer, there are so many layers of things always happening at any given moment. It can be overstimulating if you're easily distracted. But one of the things, as we're walking to the photo location, I noticed that like the light was beautiful, the colors, they were leaving the ceremony, so they were kind of celebrating. I stopped them right there and I gave them a direction. I said, we're going to dance our way to the photo location. And we started, and everybody was off beat, and it wasn't giving what I wanted it to give. And so I stopped them and I demonstrated what I wanted them to do and got them started up again. And they gave me the energy, or they gave me what I was seeing in my head originally when I asked them to do it. But what this was for me, I realized that even little old introverted me, that this was not an intimidating thing. It was actually quite fun, creative thing to do. And I developed a love of posing groups. I actually enjoy posing groups. I like to use the environment. I like to, if I have a large group or a small group, I find it as a fun challenge to find interesting ways, time allowing, to pose them and style them together. And I have several different ways of approaching group portraiture, but I want to show the connection between the people, and I want to show their style, their vibe, their energy, and a lot of what I choose to do with a group is often pulled from the people, from the things that I overhear people saying. I say observation is king when it comes to any area of focus in photography, but I used to move very fast with weddings. I would show up and I'm like, gotta get the shot, gotta get the shot, get the shot. And I realized their power in stopping and slowing down and listening to the sounds around me when I show up on the wedding day and paying attention to all of the dynamics and all of the things that I observe, and then using that as a baseline to connect with people and using that as a source to pull inspiration from. This photo was my obsession with smoke bombs phase. I think there was a trend, I forget when, but I became obsessed with that and steel wool photography and all of the pyro that I later decided to stop doing. But it was fun, and I again enjoyed. This was when I started also playing around with off-camera light. I was an on-camera flash girl for a long time, and I went from that, being an on-camera flash girl, mostly found light girl, like, to teaching about lighting. And I have come a long way from being that person. I realized weddings will force you to learn about all the light, learning how to shape light, learning how to use the card, work with the cards that you're dealt, and how to bend and shape the light if the cards that you are dealt are not favorable. And that's one thing I can say, that it can be a valuable experience for any photographer in terms of broadening your skill set. I included this image here because it's, it's my portrait work, but also just, this is a New York City favorite. My love of framing, my love of movement. In portrait, whether it's stills or a moment, I'm always seeking ways to incorporate movement, whether it's my subject moving or placing them in an environment with movement, or even if everything is still, making it feel like movement. And again, playing around with wide lenses was another phase. I still have not outgrown that phase. I enjoy distortion and all. I enjoy using wide lenses for things you wouldn't typically use them for, and wedding portraits, couples engagement portraits, close, wide and close is not something that is a choice that I think many couples would choose as their first choice, you know, especially the wedding clients that I work with. But I enjoy playing around with wide lenses, not only for dance floor shots, but in my portrait work. And in developing my style and how, and in developing my niche rather, and how I landed at weddings is, again, I don't go out. I don't party, but I get to do that when when I photograph weddings. I really enjoy I've carved out a niche specifically of multicultural weddings. I've had not every, but I've had a lot of blended culture weddings, every combination you can imagine. And it's really just exciting and beautiful and fun. I'm an honorary Haitian, an honorary Nigerian, Liberian, Filipino, you name it. Because I have a client base that is so beautifully diverse, and I have learned so much in focusing on in this very specific genre of wedding photography. So when we talk about weddings, we can't escape the fact that it's not just about photography. Wedding photography is also very much, although it's a business transaction, it's very much a personal thing, right? It's a personal thing, it's a personal connection. People want to like you as their photographer because you're going to be in their space. People have very high expectations, a lot of thought and planning and goes into a wedding day. A lot of expectation for many people, especially those planning beautiful weddings. And, you know, a lot of times what I've learned along the way is that the soft skills are extremely important when it comes to wedding photography. What a client imagines on their wedding day is this peaceful, serene scene with this perfectly curated moment of a bride waiting to get into her dress. And the reality is, this is what it looks like in many instances when I show up on the wedding day. Mm-hmm. In many instances, it's messy, it's bustling energy and people getting ready. It is not flawless and perfection. It is real moments, real things happening. And when you're navigating this with couples that want the perfection and don't know how important the messy parts are as well, it requires you to not only be an artist or photographer, but also to be a person that understands people and how to connect people and wear a number of hats when it comes to working with people. This next image is a part of my journey in figuring out what I want my work to look and feel like. I want, this was an engagement portrait session, and again, finding my style and finding my voice in photography made me realize that I need to lean into the things that I'm drawn to. And I'm very much drawn to these interesting, found light, interesting patches of light, but also texture and movement. And so where there's an opportunity to incorporate movement, I am going to embrace it. Where there's an opportunity to pose a group in an interesting way, I'm going to take it. This was a wedding in Chicago. And this also exemplifies one of the things I enjoy about the challenge of being a wedding photographer. I honestly believe you cannot be bored in this area of focus, because I'm often challenged to create a palace out of an alleyway. And I love when you are presented with opportunities to create something out of something, take something bland and create something interesting. This was just the side of an industrial building. It was brown. Not a first choice when you're in downtown Chicago. There are plenty of lights and pretty things to play with for a backdrop in Chicago, and we did do some of that. But I saw this building and this staircase, and I thought, this perfect. We are going to ignore all of the bright lights of Chicago, and we're going to go to this brown building. And I realized that there's room and space to do things like this. And this is the way that you can make your work in this area fresh, is pushing yourself. We don't know what cards we're going to be dealt when we show up on the wedding day. We don't have, beyond knowing where the wedding is actually going to take place, I don't know, often don't know, what their prep location is going to look like, what their ceremony location might look like. I might not even know what's in the area for us to work with in terms of taking photos of groups of people. And so sometimes we show up and, for lack of a better term, we have to work with spaces that are not traditionally pretty spaces. It's a beautiful thing when you can learn how to make something that is traditionally not the prettiest location into something interesting. It's a great creative exercise. Light. So developing my style meant that I needed to learn all the light. I don't work in a controlled environment. I'm not in a studio, and I'm not, I'm not in one place for the wedding day. We are typically in several places for the wedding day. And huge part of creating a beautiful and cohesive end product for your wedding client is embracing the light that you have to work with and learning how to shape it. In a single wedding day, I could start out in a bright window lit, airy space, then be at a ceremony that is surrounded by windows and backlit at noon. You're the processional being backlit. I could have hard light. I could have warm ambient light. I could be doing a first look midday in the midday sun. And then in that same wedding, moments later, overcast. And finally, in the evening, I'm in an indoor ballroom with 30-foot ceilings, 20-foot ceilings, or doing an outdoor night portrait. So weddings, I once heard a photographer friend of mine said that wedding photographers are the Swiss Army knives of photography. And I don't know if that's her original quote, but I thought it was pretty accurate, because we really do learn how to work with and shape all the light. We have no choice. And I enjoy that part, that challenge of a wedding. But the one thing that comes with the territory of confronting varying lighting conditions and environmental conditions in one given client job is that you want to still be able to create a cohesive collection of work that looks like it fits together and that it's a story. You want to tell the story in a way that is visually pleasing and cohesive. And you learn how to do that through controlling the colors and tones in your environment. And I've learned how to shape the story and control the tones in the environment by being intentional about the backdrops and the placement of people and the way I capture the way I capture a moment. I learned through educational endeavors that there was a power in controlling the narrative through being intentional in the settings and the colors and tones that you choose before you even start to take the picture. Thinking about the entire day, thinking about what you want people to feel when they look at the final product, and then being intentional about the backdrops and settings that you choose so that it all fits together. People are a huge part of my passion for weddings. This was a this was a spontaneous moment between the grandparents, I believe grandparents of the bride. They were leaving the ceremony. They were exiting the ceremony, and the grandparents just spontaneously kissed, and I couldn't miss that. So it's a wide shot. I love that I was in the right place at the right time to capture this moment, but to capture this perspective of all the people. Kind of everyone was surprised. Sometimes weddings are, luck, but also anticipation. This was a auntie that was very much over it. And I've learned that moving around, this is a first dance that, I don't stand still on the wedding day. I'm constantly moving. And the reason I do this are moments like this. Storytelling requires you to shift your perspective. And on a day where there are tiny little cogs all in the wheel kind of interworking together and layers of things happening at the same time, it's important, I think, to move with intention still, but continue to move around the moments as they happen. This is an urn. The bride's father passed away, and she carried his ashes with her on her wedding day. I thought it was a beautiful tribute to her father. I also was very much moved by the fact that what I do is not just taking pretty pictures of people in pretty clothing, carrying pretty flowers, but these are photos that are very much meaningful to the people that I work with. And these are their family keepsakes, and it's a beautiful thing when someone tells me that that the photo I captured, that it's on their wall, and that they cherish it, and that they've gifted it to someone else. And so for me, that is kind of, I like that. One of the things that I enjoy about this is the people component. Moving around real moments as they happen so that I can tell the story from various vantage points. Again, this is a ceremony entrance of the bride, and I took the risk of moving away from the perspective of being in front of, if you know anything about a processional, it's happening in real time, and it sometimes happens very quickly. But I made the choice to kind of step outside from in front and move around because I thought that there was a better story for me to tell. And I do have a second photographer, but I thought it was a better story for me to tell to capture this bride's entrance from this perspective after having already gotten a safe shot. The people are the beauty of this work for me. And I'm sharing this image because this was a couple that I worked with last year. This bride had been following my work for years. She is one of the couple, they had all of their dream vendors lined up, and I was one of them, honored to be one of them. And on their wedding day, before they could even walk down the aisle, their wedding venue went up in flames, and they did not get to walk down the aisle on their wedding day. And they were, of course, devastated. And these are the types of things that you can't really learn about from holding a light or second shooting, is that the people component, these are real people experiencing real things, and you're being entrusted to be in someone's orbit when they are doing something so important as starting their lives together or getting married, is truly an honor. And this was an unusual situation. I've encountered quite a few challenging ones, having been in business for over 10 years now. But this was a first. If you ask me what was the craziest thing that ever happened at a wedding, I would say this. But it taught me the importance of the relationships and learning how to navigate challenging situations, and learning that the value in navigating these relationships results in you having lifetime clients who refer other people and strong arm other people to work with you. That couple ended up having their wedding a year later. The venue made them whole and made things right, and some people might have chosen not to have a wedding again. They did end up having their wedding again, and we all got some important takeaways. Myself, even as a wedding vendor, got some important takeaways that made me both a better business person, a better photographer, a better human being. Sharing this because it's a trend that is here to stay, even though I don't know who thought this was a good idea to give drunken wedding guests fire to play with at the end of the night. But this is just a classic kind of moment that happens at a lot of weddings, which is the sparkler exit. And while you may see some of those sparkler exits that they look quite polished and fun, the reality of it is that for every wedding sparkler photo you see, there is some stressed out planner or photographer screaming at the guests to line up and to not let the fire burn out. But they are challenging for a number of reasons. The guest component, the lighting component, we're usually doing them outside in the dark. But that is kind of the classic wedding moment that happens often. And one that I say is boot camp for photographers, if you can get through a sparkler shot. Ones where you have all of their guests, send them off. Those are the ones. Sometimes they just take a handful of people, but when you have like 150, 200 people holding fire, it gets interesting. So in closing, I just want to quickly touch on the topic of relationships. Relationships have been impactful in my life, and I'm talking true, authentic relationships. I mentioned how early in my career, I did a lot of concert photography. I have photographed so many celebrities. I had opportunities to work these concerts, and that was my first kind of segue into getting paid to be a photographer, was that experience. And that every opportunity I've ever had, every big opportunity I've ever had has been born of a relationship. I have formerly served on the board of directors for Professional Photographers of America. I am a Sony Artisan of Imagery. I am, I've spoken at photography industry conferences nationally and internationally. Every single opportunity that I have ever received is born of someone who was rooting for me, someone who floated my name in spaces that I was not aware my name was being floated. The very fact that I'm here tonight is a representation of those seeds that were sown through relationships. And I want to close on this note that it is in forming and building relationships, it's important for them to be real connections. And I don't mean necessarily a reciprocal relationship, but one that is born of a meaningful tie between two people. It could be a friendship. It could be a business kind of alignment or partnership. But when there is a meaningful value, exchange of connection between these two people or groups of people, you end up having a network of people rooting for you to win. A network of people who want to see you succeed. a network of people who are supporting you even when you don't even know it. And I'm truly grateful for the impact of relationships. And so this was my first project for Sony. When I joined the Artisan program, I was a part of a launch. I did not incorporate the launch video in tonight's presentation, but I was a part of a launch for their flagship camera, the A1, and a part of the launch for this lens. And I was very excited to be able to get access to this gear that I loved using and create work with it and have it appear as a part of this this product launch. But people often ask me, like, how did you become an ambassador, or how did you get on, what brought you here? How do you find clients? How do you get all these amazing clients and go to all these wonderful places? How are you? And I always say that relationships, and it sounds like probably the most helpful, unhelpful answer, but it's the right answer. And I encourage you to, and those relationships don't necessarily mean somebody who is, super well connected. I've had opportunities. Before I was a full-time photographer and I worked at an investment bank, our administrative assistant for the department, I got a huge opportunity from the department's administrative assistant. So, and we had an authentic, real connection. We would grab lunch together and things like that. So I encourage you to lean into your relationships and look to them as a source for support, and be a resource and a support to others. And that is the close to my presentation. Thank you. This is where you can find me. I'm findable by name on most platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Kesha Lambert. I'm on TikTok. I'm a TikTok baby, but you can find me on TikTok. Kesha Loves Hats. I am always wearing hats. And thanks again, everyone.
How do you handle the chaos of a wedding?
That's a great question. How do I handle the chaos? I do think that I have a personality that is, I think your disposition and personality, there's certain personalities that are well suited for the chaos of a wedding. I have a very calm, centered disposition, and in the face of chaos, I'm a problem solver. I'm very my brain and the way I'm wired, I have a very calm disposition. And so I also realize that it always works out, right? You learn through experience that there's always a plan B, C, and D that you can do. And it's a challenge at first, but you really exercise those creative muscles when you're faced with the chaos. I work with and lean into the chaos, or I control it. So when I say controlling the chaos could be me, a good example is if I show up on a wedding day and I know that my bride wants a really curated, beautiful robe shot, I'm going to create the space and the circumstance. I might relocate a moment to another spot. Or if I have a couple that is, open, I might use the chaos as a part of the image. So, I don't run from it. You expect it. You also, I think between my disposition and just it comes with experience, you learn that it's not so scary, and it's quite an exciting part of the wedding story. So, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yes. Hi. I'd like to know about, I'm sure you have a second shooter.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes.
Please. Thank you.
In many instances, my second shooter is my husband. And hi, and one right there, Krishana. She's an amazing photographer. I'm happy to see your face, girl. So yeah, I have a very because very rarely will I use somebody random as a second photographer. We are a very close-knit group. The people that I work with, they are either family, they are mentees, and they are friends. So like, I think because we're doing people work, especially people work tied to so much expectation and emotion, it's important for us to have chemistry as a team. So yes, I absolutely work with second photographers. It's a small group of people. The needs, as they evolve and change, I will certainly look to others. I have, a wider network of people I might work with, but my first choice is always to work with the team, right? And how I work with second photographers, I always tell my second photographers, I'm on the hook for the deliverables and the shot list. I really encourage second photographers to push perspective and to, to wherever I'm at, you should be somewhere else. Like they get to not be in their head about the shot list or the deliverables, and they get to do the other things. They're also an extension of me. Like everyone has to be experienced, professional. Like everyone who second shoots also lead shoots weddings. If I passed out, God forbid, they could hit the ground running and we'd be fine, So I work with experienced people who themselves lead shoot weddings. And we together we're able to, that's why, when we talk about like taking, I wouldn't say I'm not a documentary purist photographer, and I'm not a scripted kind of posed photographer. I'm right down the middle, and we're able to be right down the middle in that I'm able to do those directed, scripted kind of work, but also get a lot of those tiny little things that if I were working alone would be missed, because we're working as a team to capture everything.
Great, thank you. Yes.
Hi, thank you for this wonderful presentation of your work.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions. So,
Yes, sure.
when you mentioned about having a second shooter, in this case, like it's your family and someone you know for a very long time, have you had situations where you have the second photographer so engrossed in the way that you work that they start following you, and in the case that they end up making very similar frames to yours, and that gets published somewhere, or have you had such a chance, and how did you deal with it, if so?
I haven't encountered, you mean like they do the exact same, so I do have like, we do have expectations set out about how the work is used and when it's used and all that wonderful stuff. So I work with people that I trust. So I have not encountered a situation where I felt like it compromised something with the client relationship or anything like that. But in terms of similar work, I think that is one of the very things that I don't want. I want our work to look like it fits together. So I do work with people who kind of follow the same philosophy and approach and have similar kind of creative philosophy to capturing weddings. I don't want us to be producing identical things. And so a lot goes into making sure that we aren't replicating each other. My goal with people that I work with is for them to be individuals. I work with them because they're exceptional, and I want them to contribute that to the pot, of what we deliver to the client. And so I'd say because of the fact that I'm not like working with people randomly, that's not an issue that comes up often. And I think, and there have been instances where I needed, like I was in a bind or something happened and I need to find someone else. I still am going to, that's when I probably would look to people. I still am going to look to a network of people that I trust. That's why community is important, participating in community and having resources beyond. I have my tight-knit group, but I also have a wider net of people that I can look to that I feel I could trust to if I needed someone to work with. Yeah, so.
Thank you. My next question would be like, your earlier works, the editing or the post-processing process looks more like grungy. There's a clarity in the photos. This is very similar to when we like start out that phase. So what made you make the decision to your current style of processing the photos and presenting them?
I think it's just growth. It's growth. I think, honestly, like I was clueless when I was, you say I had the grungy style. I was just taking pictures, growth is intention in how you use the tools that you have to create an image and growth is, the editing style will evolve. I become I work with a lot of interracial couples, so getting skin tones and things like that became a thing that I care very deeply about getting right for people. And so it's a part of like your journey in finding your style and learning. I still have so much to learn, even though I have hundreds of weddings under my belt. I've worked with big brands, done, lots of projects. I believe that we're always evolving, we're always learning. And so what the differences you see are me continuing to try to be better at the craft and continuing to learn.
Thank you for sharing your story and your work with us. I found it to be really inspiring.
Thank you.
And I'm wondering perhaps if you could go back earlier in your journey.
Mm-hmm.
How did you navigate the inner critic that emerges when you're doing creative work that's new, where there's high expectations that you've placed on yourself and others? What was your process to navigate that, and how is that different from then till now? And then if there's time also, like, where do you go or what do you do to draw inspiration at this stage in your journey?
Thank you. Those are some great questions. Because that inner critic, boy, that imposter syndrome, especially, so, and I don't know if everyone heard the question. I'll try to summarize. The question is, how do you counteract that inner critic that tells you that you're just not ready yet or you're not good enough? Is that a good kind of assessment of what and I mentioned that it took me a long time to call myself a photographer or to say that I was a photographer. I do believe that it's something that I continue to struggle with, to be honest. I'm highly critical of my own work. However, I changed my relationship with, and it was my criticism of my work was never born of comparison. So one of the things I will say is that I don't look at the work of others and kind of as a benchmark for what my work should be. The benchmark that I decided to set for myself, and I think it changed kind of a shift in my mindset about those self-critiques, is that, and you probably have heard this phrase before, but what I created today, is it better than what I created yesterday? Am I improving? Did I learn something new? Did I do something new? And I also realized that flaws are a part of many a great image, and it's okay. And is it something that I can seek as an opportunity to learn from? And if it is, I go and I learn the thing. Or is it something that did well for the image and works, and learn to accept the thing? And so it's kind of a shift in my mindset about what it means. I'm not in pursuit of being the best or the greatest of anything. I just want to continue to create work that makes people want to stop and look, makes people think, makes someone pause for a moment, or makes someone's heart full. And if I'm reaching those kind of markers, I feel a sense of satisfaction in what I've done, while also knowing that there are endless possibilities and opportunities for me to grow. I'm still here, I'm still breathing, I'm still going to get better, right? And so I lean into that in turn, and it quiets that voice that tells you that you don't belong here. And I'm sorry, could you repeat, your second question was?
Where do you go or what do you do to draw inspiration
Inspiration?
at this point in your journey?
So I look to the things that, pulling inspiration for me sometimes means putting the camera down. In many instances, I don't have a camera in hand. I have a very vivid imagination. There are things that I enjoy and that I'm drawn to, and leaning into doing those things are a great way to kind of center yourself. And so I pull inspiration. I mentioned, like, when it comes to wedding work, I pull inspiration from people. I'm not a creep, but I am a people watcher, a people observer, And that goes for even the people in my direct orbit, my family, my loved ones. So a lot of times I put the camera down, I try to be fully present, and do some of the things that that are enjoyable. Another thing that I think is important, that when you offer your craft as a business, you're getting as a service provider, or whether you're selling your art, whatever it is, when you're doing the work to make money, right? Is that it can make you lose sight of the reason you even started doing this. And so it's important to do things, pick up the camera again, and create things that take pictures of the things that you want to take pictures of, do the projects that you want to do, tell the stories that you want to tell, make time to do that. It's speaking as a, I'm a small business owner, so even though we delegate, we wear many a hat. And sometimes it's hard to turn it off and make time to do those things, but it's important to really just take the pictures for fun, do the project you want to do. So I think making sure that you always do that is important.
Fabulous, thank you. Last, yep. Lovely, thank you.
I found it really interesting how you mentioned that you really enjoy the editing process. And I was wondering, how do you deal with kind of doing the creative things with just the sheer amount of editing that you have to do?
The massive amounts so I'm not gonna lie, I use some editing shortcuts. I'm not painstaking over hundreds of images. That's a great question. I do enjoy the editing part of the process, and sometimes when I'm capturing an image, I have an idea for an edit that I'm going to do. Sometimes I shoot in color, but I intend for this image to be black and white, or I've shot this image wider or underexposed or a little overexposed because I intend to do something with it in post. I intend to do a creative crop, or I intend to, do something creatively in the edit. That being said, the question was, how do you hold on to that when you are doing weddings where we, in a single wedding, we shoot thousands of frames at the end of the night, and we have to cull and post-process all of those photos. And there are quite literally thousands to go through to kind of select your finals. I use shortcuts. I use AI culling. I use AI batch editing to do my baseline edits, and then the ones that I had the ideas for, I pull those, and they're using my editing style. So yes, with weddings, with the mass amounts of photos that you have to get through, I use shortcuts to kind of speed up my process. I still am, I have an editor that I outsource to kind of handle that part, and then I am personally going through, I do the final checks and the final touches. I pull kind of these signature images, the ones that I had ideas for, the ones that I want to put my little seasonings on. I pull those, and those are the ones that I spend the bulk of time on.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Okay, Kesha,
Thank you, everyone.